always wanted to do that. Good evening. Tonight is February 19th, 2024, meeting of the City of Daytona Beach Charter Review Commission. At this time, Madam Clerk, can you please take a roll call?
Ann Ruby, Paul Zimmerman, Christopher Bowler, Harry Lloyd,
Here.
Phyllis Terry, is it Mala?
Malia, like mail your letter.
Mayoya. Ida Wright.
Here.
Stephen Miller.
Here.
Sandy Murphy. Here. John Keenan. Jack White.
Here.
William Kamer. Here. Katina Brown. Here. Russell Weatherton. Here. And Frederick Brown told me he was going to be absent.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome the members of the Charter Review Commission and thank you for your willingness to serve in this important civic undertaking. I'm Dru Driscoll, Deputy City Manager. I will serve as your staff liaison, working alongside City Clerk Ms. Letitia LaMagna. We're here to assist you and the Commission in answering any questions, providing guidance, and facilitating any resources you may have throughout this process. City Attorney Ben Gross is here to provide the Commission legal counsel, clarification, and guidance throughout the proceedings. On behalf of Mayor Henry, members of the City Commission, and City Manager Derek Feature, we thank you for your service and look forward to a productive and thorough review of our city's charter. During the meetings, the members on the dais are permitted to speak and vote. Alternate members may speak on any item at the appropriate time designated by the Commission, but are unable to vote unless sitting at the dais. Correct, Ben?
Yes.
Yep. At this point, the Commission needs to elect a chairperson who will take over the proceedings following the vote. Are there any nominations for chairperson on the floor?
I'd like to nominate Ida Wright.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second.
Would you?
Are you willing to serve?
I decline serving as chair. You decline? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to nominate Stephen Miller.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. 6-0. At this time, we'll turn over the meeting to Chair Miller, who will elect a vice chair. You want to sit in the chair seat? Come on.
We'll move.
To really move far.
Yeah, you-
Take your little bag there.
Oh, okay. Let me hand this to you too, just in case Sandy gets unruly.
They have to pick a chair.
Vice chair.
Ann Ruby.
Okay.
I'd like to nominate Ann Ruby. Maybe I can't do that. I probably need to say, well, we have a motion on the floor for a vice chair. Any motions?
Mr. Chair, I nominate Ann Ruby.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have a second for Ms.?
Do we have a second? Can I second it?
Ask
You
Ben.
cannot.
Can I come as chairman? Okay.
He can't second.
We need a second for that motion to go forward.
Oh, I'll second.
There's been a
I'm only
motion and a
half here.
second. All in favor of Ann Ruby, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Great. We'll go to item 4.1, the Sunshine Law, Public Records Ethics, Ben Gross, City Attorney, to report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the benefit of the board members, we wanted to get the really dry, boring, technical stuff out of the way as soon as possible in this meeting. I've been handed a control that I have no idea how to use, but I do have a PowerPoint, assuming I could, I didn't do anything and it showed up. It may work by telepathy. So this is my PowerPoint for legal overview. So let me just have a show of hands. How many of our committee members have served on an elected body or advisory board for a Florida government agency in the past? Okay. So I'm still going to go through everything just for your but I'll talk a little faster for your benefit and for the benefit of maybe some of our alternates who may not have served before. But I think we all know what the Sunshine Law is. It prohibits decisions being made in the smoke-filled room. It requires that 2 or more members of the same board have any discussion that they're going to have on an item that's going to come up for consideration by the board, to have it in a public meeting that's been advertised in advance with minutes taken at a location that's accessible to the public. And the Sunshine Law has a lot of tricks for the unwary and potentially carries with it criminal liability. So we are going to go through a couple of these things. And of course, if you ever have a question regarding compliance with things like the Sunshine Law or Public Records Law, I'll give you our office's phone number at the end of my presentation, and you should always feel free to call me. And if I'm not around, you can ask for any of the attorneys on staff. The Sunshine Law applies to you even though you're an advisory board, just like it applies to boards that are elected. It applies to you as an advisory board whether you're compensated or not. So in return for your voluntary service, if you are really, really injudicious, you could end up having criminal liability for your volunteer service. So I don't mean to scare you, but that is the way the law works. So the Sunshine Law would not only prohibit the 2 of you from having a direct conversation, but also from communicating by less direct means. If the communication is prohibited, that includes emails, it includes texts, it includes phone calls, it includes notes, it includes using Letitia LaMagna or anybody else with the intention that member A is going to communicate to Tish with the direction to communicate to member B to communicate back to Tish. So it's designed to defeat, indirect methods, the same as if you were having a face-to-face conversation. One thing that would typically come up with the Sunshine Law is if you as a commission member feel that you need to send correspondence in on something that may be coming up, your sending correspondence does not constitute a conversation. However, if it's an issue that one of your fellow commission members are really passionate about, your note may spark a conversation when that member then corresponds back to you. So our recommendation for making sure that you comply with the Sunshine Law is that if you have that kind of communication, that you send it to Ms. LaMagna with the request that she then forward it on. The second thing is that if one of you commission members do receive a group email from one of your commission members, don't hit reply all, okay? And make sure your replies are directed toward Ms. LaMagna whenever you can. I'm old enough now where I can't actually see that, but I'll take a guess and say that what this slide says is you're not going to violate the Sunshine Law by talking to your zone commissioner. They're not on this commission. By talking to staff, they're not on this commission. Me, I'm not on this commission. Members of the public, they're not on this commission. And here's an additional wrinkle for this commission, which is only the second commission I've had the privilege of providing legal counsel to in about 30-some years of local government law. Any one of you can, without violating the Sunshine Law, communicate with your alternate without violating the Sunshine Law because you only get one vote. So, and the same goes with the alternate. An alternate can communicate and not violate the Sunshine Law about upcoming items with the member for whom they're an alternate, okay? Not a violation of the Sunshine Law, unless we decide to give alternates their own votes, and we'll keep you posted. In which case, you're not alternates anymore. Okay, so by extension, staff meetings that we might have, like the one we had to prepare for this meeting, Drew and Tish and I, those are not Sunshine Law violations. If you were to, however, if you as a commission were to delegate to one of your specific members something that you might otherwise do as a committee, that delegation to a single person would then require that single person to do whatever that task is at a duly noticed meeting with minutes taken where the public can be available. All right, so boy, is there any way to zoom in on this? Or to maybe just bring the TV closer to me? How's that? Can we do that?
Is that closer for you?
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I probably
I
should look
can
to the
see
left.
Ooh. big
Oh, wow.
words.
Okay.
I think I know what's going to happen with my eye exam come March.
That was closer.
One aspect of the Sunshine Law is that, with certain exceptions, none of which will apply to this commission, the public has to have the right to be heard before you all take official action on a proposition. It doesn't mean that you have to allow people to be disruptive. You can maintain reasonable rules of proper decorum. And my understanding is that Ms. Lamagna is probably going to suggest to you that you all use the sign-in sheets and the 3-minute rule that the commission uses. That's an example of a reasonable rule that you could apply.
Makes sense.
You can skip to the next one. All right, so here's the 3 basic requirements to have a meeting that complies with the Sunshine Law. It has to be noticed in advance, open to the public, at a location where the public could attend. If we decided to have our next meeting in San Diego, that would violate the Sunshine Law. And it requires minutes of the meeting to be taken. You don't need to take the minutes. That's what one of the things that Ms. Lamagna is here for. You have all of those things, you have a meeting that complies with the Sunshine Law. And this is something I alluded to earlier. You can be found to be criminally liable for even an unintentional violation of the Sunshine Law. And if you look at no other slide than this one, you probably want to look at this one very closely. An unintentional violation is prosecutable as a non-criminal infraction for a fine up to $500. A knowing violation can be $500 or a jail term of not more than 60 days. In addition, it can lead to suspension or removal from office, and you might have to pay your attorney's fees and costs in those kind of situations. So again, if you have a question, it's always better to call us beforehand. You know, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound and $500 worth of cure. Okay, we have a quiz.
Okay.
2 county commissioners let's make them 2 charter review commissioners are talking to each other at a football game. A reporter is with the commissioners and can hear the entire conversation between the 2 commissioners. The commissioners, A, have not violated the Sunshine Law because even though they were discussing commission business, the meeting's a public meeting because a reporter's present. B, they have violated the Sunshine Law if they talked about matters that foreseeably could come before the committee for discussion or action. C, have violated the Sunshine Law only if they're talking about commission matters that have been scheduled for a vote by the commission. So choices are A, B, C, or choice D is what you would choose if you thought both B and C are correct. All right, who thinks A is correct? Raise your hand.
No.
Okay, who thinks B is correct? Who thinks B and C are correct? Good job. All right, we got an A so far, but not choice A. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Another quiz question. 2 charter review commissioners are talking to each other at a football game. A reporter, oh, this is the
Okay,
answer.
the answer.
This is our
Oh.
answer. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. Okay. A city commissioner meets privately with another member of the city commission to discuss a contract which is under consideration by the commission. Which of the following answers is true? A, the state attorney could charge the commission members with a violation of the Sunshine Law. B, the attorney general could charge the authority members with a non-criminal infraction for violating the Sunshine Law. C, the Florida Ethics Commission could charge the authority members with violating the Sunshine Law. D, all of the above. Who thinks it's A? Who thinks it's B? I'm sorry, this is a trick question. Who thinks it's C? Who thinks it's D?
D.
All right, so let's turn the page, and the answer is A, because the state attorney prosecutes Sunshine Law violations. That's a dirty trick that only people with a lot of years in government would know. I didn't create this slide, I'll just say in my own defense, but yeah, you would be charged by the state attorney. Okay, next slide. Question, can 2 members of the same board socialize? Sure, as long as you don't discuss things that could reasonably, foreseeably be coming before you for consideration or action. And you do have to be mindful that even though your conversation might only have to do with that football game that you two attended last week, people watch you talking in public, and you know, people can always sling out accusations. So I'm not saying you should never have those kind of discussions. You know, we're not really a huge city, but you just have to be a little bit careful about those kind of interactions. Next slide. All right, we're going to shift to public records law. The Florida statutes require public access to public records. And what is a public record? A public record is any record that is given or received, next slide please, in connection with official business, right? So that includes documents, papers, letters, books, tapes, photographs, films, sound recordings, text messages, emails, and it doesn't matter where those records are created or received from. It doesn't matter whether it's a cell phone that you've been provided by the city, if you have a city cell phone, or your private cell phone. It doesn't matter whether it's your home computer or a work computer. It doesn't matter whether it's a handwritten note or a note typed on a computer. If you receive it or you generate it in connection with the business of this commission, it's a public record. With one exception, I make reminder notes to myself all the time. Unless and until I give that reminder note to somebody else, that's not a public record. It's just something to help me remember stuff, okay? So in order to be a public record, as the last line of this slide reads, it has to be a note that's used to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. All right, let's turn the page, please. Thank you. There is no exception to a public records request merely because the sender doesn't want the public record disclosed. Somebody requesting a public record isn't required to show a legitimate need or a non-commercial interest. We routinely get public records requests for names of people who are utility account holders. They're obviously going to be mass mailed. Actually, this probably doesn't occur in the days of the internet as much as it used to, but you know, in the old days, we'd get requests for mailing lists, and the utility customers would then receive mass mailouts from some commercial enterprise. They can legitimately request and receive those records. Ms. LaMagna could talk with you more about this, but a request can't be denied simply because it's overbroad. In fact, a lot of the work of her office is trying to make sense of some requests so that we can show a good faith effort to comply with it. We can't require a public records request be made in writing. We can't require that if somebody makes a public records request to any one of us, we say, go talk to Ms. LaMagna. If any of us receive a public records request, we need to forward that request to the custodian. We can't make the requester then request to the custodian. We also can't make them put it in writing or to identify themselves, although there's some logistics issues with somebody who does not identify themselves being able to receive what they've requested. Next one, please. On the other hand, we're not required to comply with standing requests for public records. If I were to submit a public records request for any records that the city clerk may receive for the next 20 years, she does not have to comply with that. That's a standing request. We're not required to answer questions about the public records that we do disclose. And we're not required to create new records when we don't have them. Okay, next one. Before I get to the violations, let me just mention something that's I mean, this is more interesting than necessarily of concern for you, even though there is potential criminal liability for failure to comply with public records law. The good news for you as commission members is most of the records that you will see, including, say, for example, your agenda materials tonight, they're copies. You are not the custodian of those copies. The city clerk is. You're not the person who's obligated to maintain and keep those records. The clerk is. So the exception would be texts, emails you receive or send from your own phone, Facebook statements that may get posted if you have a Facebook page. For that, you would be the custodian of those records. And one bit of advice that we always give any of our board members as well as our city commissioners is if you don't want to have to be considered to be the custodian of those records responsible for responding to a public records request forward those texts, forward those emails to the city clerk. And then we'll be the custodian. Because as you can see, under 119.10 of the Florida statutes, a public officer who violates the public records law is punishable by a non-criminal infraction with a fine of not to exceed $500. And then if the violation is knowing, then in addition to that $500, they can be subject to suspension, removal, or impeachment. And it's also a misdemeanor, which could mean jail time. So even an unknowing violation can lead to a criminal, to a non-criminal fine, just like with the Sunshine Law. Knowing violations can be, subject to jail. Next slide. And then if it's willful unknowingly, then, it can get worse. It's a higher degree misdemeanor. And if it's specifically information that's exempt or confidential, that's contained in police reports, which I don't think we'll be dealing with here, then it's a higher degree felony still. So, I mean, that's a felony, not a misdemeanor. It elevates that. Next slide, please. Okay, another quiz. City clerk wants to send an email from his or her personal computer to a city council member about an item on the council agenda. Which statement is correct? A, the email is a public record. B, the email is not a public record because personal emails are not subject to the public records law. C, the email is not a public record, but the council member should not respond to the email because the response would violate the Sunshine Law. D, the email is a public record, but the council member should not respond because the response would, the email is a public record, but the council member should not respond because that would violate the Sunshine Law. Who here thinks it's A? A is correct. We know that B is incorrect because it doesn't matter if you send or receive it from a private email, and this isn't a Sunshine Law issue between a city clerk and a council person. They're not on the same committee. Next slide, please. Okay, ethics. Before we advance any slides, you are subject to the Ethics in Government, Ethics for Public Officials Act under Florida law. And the obvious thing that the ethics law prohibits is bribes, okay? Don't take bribes. Bribes are bad, and they're criminal violations, okay? And you might think that's silly, but it's an important jumping off point because the point of the ethics code is that we all have conflicts in our everyday lives. The ethics code is intended not only to make sure that we don't do things like solicit or accept bribes, but we don't do things that approach that. So the legislation draws the line, to prohibit behavior that really doesn't even constitute a bribe. And so we're going to look at some of those things in the next couple of slides. Next, please. So this is a variation of a bribe. You shouldn't do anything such as soliciting or accepting anything of value based on the promise or understanding that your vote or action would be influenced by acceptance of that thing of value. Doesn't have to be money. It could be baseball cards. I don't know why I brought up baseball cards. So I'm not actually looking for baseball cards anymore. But next slide, please. And these are all like real obvious things, and they're still just variations on what I consider to be bribes, right? No public officer or employee, which would include you, and local government attorneys, that's me, can corruptly use or attempt to use their official position or property or resource that we have within our control, or perform our official duties, or in order to secure a special privilege for ourselves or others, right? So you know that I like baseball cards. It would be as corrupt of me to suggest that I might treat you favorably if you give my wife a baseball card as if you gave it to me. And if you did give it to my wife, I would never see that baseball card. So next slide, please. Voting conflicts, this is the real obvious one, and this is an example of something where there really isn't anything related to a bribe, but the legislation wants to prohibit even the appearance of impropriety. So, and one of the other really good things about this statutory provision is it has the word "in or," which I don't think you'll ever see ever again in your entire life unless it's at another Sunshine Law presentation. So basically, public officers, officials cannot vote in an official capacity on a measure which would, I'm going to say, go to his or her special private gain or loss. Let's just stop there. So there may be measures like zoning measures, which this commission's not going to be involved in, that affect 80 properties, and you might have one of those parcels. You can't assume that would go to your special private gain or loss because it may not be special. It's in common with 80 other property owners. So less use for you here now than if, say, you're ever on a planning board or city commission. But if you are, call us in advance, because the Commission on Ethics, which actually enforces the Commission on Ethics, has cases that split hairs based on the percentage of total property that's being benefited in order to determine whether you would be specially benefited. And of course, the other thing might be that it might be speculative as to whether that rezoning measure helps or hurts you. So, but if it's the rezoning for your own property and your own property alone, or a site plan for your property, then you should not vote on it. It's not only something that would go to your special gain or loss, but something that would go to the gain or loss of your employer. And there are rules on that. If you worked, let's say if IBM was here in Daytona Beach and had 10,000 employees, and you were in the procurement section, but there was a contract coming up where IBM was going to give grants for college students having nothing to do with procurement. Depending upon the facts, that may not be a voting conflict. So the thing to think about here is call us in advance if you think you might have a conflict, because we're likely to have to research it, okay? One more group of people that it extends to, other than yourself as a commission member or your employer, is a relative or a business associate. And even here, relatives can be tricky. It may be okay if it inures to your great nephew's benefit, or maybe your cousins. I don't actually know the answer to that, but not your spouses or your fathers or your child's, and I don't think your grandchildren or grandparents either. Here's the reality. I don't know how many degrees of, I think the word is consanguinity, this thing extends to. If you have any questions, please contact us beforehand and let us give you advice. Because generally under the Sunshine Law, you can't just abstain because it might be a tricky measure for you. You have to vote unless you can't. Well, you can't vote if you have a voting conflict. So if you don't have a voting conflict, you're technically violating the Sunshine Law by abstaining. So I doubt you'd be prosecuted if you didn't ask me whether your great-nephew was close enough related, but it's still better to call us in advance. Next slide, please. All right, well, that's it for the legal overview. There is going to be more law stuff for you, but Drew gets to cover it, and it has to do with like what you'll actually be doing and what a charter is and more fun things like that. As Drew said at the beginning of the meeting, either I or one of my attorneys will be here at every meeting. We're available for any questions you have, not only on the topics that I've covered with you, but anything in regards to your role here with the Charter Review Commission. So appreciate your time.
One question. Can we discuss matters with our commissioner?
They're not on the same voting body issues, so yes.
Okay.
You could discuss them with planning board members too, or with me, or with staff,
Okay.
or
I just want to be clear.
anybody but the other
Okay.
commission members and alternates in this room, unless of course it's your alternate.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. You
Yep.
made a very interesting subject matter for what I thought would be boring. At this time, we will hear from our deputy city attorney and fire chief on the reason we're here today. That's the charter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In government, a charter is the foundational document which establishes the framework for how our local government works in terms of structure, responsibilities, functions, and processes. I guess I can't lean back too far. So for our charter, to our city, I equate it to what the Constitution is to the United States government. It's a document established by the will of its people on how they want their local government to run. So imagine we the people, and that's our charter. The creation, modification, dissolution of a municipal charter, they're regulated by the state constitution, state statute, and local ordinances. Again, our charter defines our local form of government, establishes our departments, services rendered, and it provides the powers and the process in which they're exercised. The Charter Review Commission's charge is to review and propose amendments to Subpart A of our charter, excluding the territorial boundaries listed in Appendix 1. The City Clerk's Office provided each of you with a copy of the charter. Other parts of the charter we're not reviewing are Part C and D, that's the police and fire pension system, that's subject to collective bargaining, and of course, Part E is the Downtown Development Authority's charter. So as you're flipping through the pages, yes, it's only 9,967 words over 22 and a half pages, but don't forget, the original Constitution was only 4,543 words over 4 pages, and that included signatures.
Did that include the Bill of Rights?
It did not include the Bill of Rights. Who needs that Bill of Rights anyways, you know? So if we understand what is a charter, we should also understand what isn't a charter. A charter is not a place for solving local government issues. A charter is not a place to fix issues you may have with one person. If you want to remove the fire chief, please don't. I like my job. But if you want to remove the fire chief, the charter is not the place to disband a fire department. You would use the power of the electorate to pressure the city manager to find a new fire chief. I'll be sad, but it's okay. Similarly, you wouldn't or couldn't amend the charter to ban development of property on the east side of Beach Street. That would justify a taking, and this would not be that location for that. Again, the charter is like a constitution in that it should only be amended as needed. Charter itself cannot automatically increase the quality of government services. It cannot stop controversial projects. It cannot decrease crime, stop panhandling, or change or eliminate state-mandated laws and activities. For best practices, when considering an issue you want to address on the charter, you should ask yourself, can the issue be solved by passage of an ordinance? Can the issue be addressed with an administrative process or an administrative measure? Does the mayor, commission, or city manager already have the authority to solve the issue? And might state legislation address this issue more effectively than a change to our local charter? Next, we want to discuss the requirements to amend the charter. Being that the charter is the will of its citizens, to amend the charter, we are required to either by ordinance or by petition, and you'll learn that that's 10% of our registered electorate. We're required by ordinance to place the proposed amendment or amendments on a ballot for a vote of our electorate at the next general election, or it could be special election. An amendment must be approved by the majority of the electorate. In our process, we have formed a Charter Review Commission. That's why we're all here. This commission will solicit the community for recommendations in addition to your own individual thoughts. A report will be drafted outlining this commission's proposed charter amendments along with suggested ballot language, which will be presented to the City Commission for their consideration. By adoption of an ordinance at 2 hearings, any proposed amendments approved by the City Commission will be placed on the November 5th, 2024 ballot. If some or all of the proposed amendments are approved by a majority of the electorate at referendum, the charter will be revised accordingly, and the updated charter will be filed with the Department of State. This will be discussed later. However, when placing an item on the ballot, in compliance with state statute, any proposed amendments must have clear and unambiguous language in its title and summary, and yes, there's a 75-word count in the summary. Furthermore,
So we
Yeah.
just have to keep out statements like, out of,
Yeah.
out of the initiatives.
I think
And,
it's
and,
15 words in
Yeah.
the question, too.
Right.
Furthermore, the proposed amendment must be for a single item per state statute. And I do not believe we have to do a fiscal integrity statement or fiscal impact statement for this.
Unlike the constitutional initiatives.
Correct.
Right.
So when I'm saying a single item for the ballot question, for instance, we cannot say, shall the charter of the city of Daytona Beach be amended as adopted by ordinance 249999? It's way too broad. More appropriate ballot question, shall the charter of the city of Daytona Beach, section 35, be amended to change the title of city clerk to the honorable clerk of the city? How hear you? Or how say you?
Drew, if I can,
Yeah.
if I can, so this is a little bit like that public records discussion where frankly, a lot of the responsibility for public records compliance rests with staff and the city clerk. We're not suggesting that this commission actually spend the time on phrasing the initiatives. That's work that we would do once your work is over, unless you want to go that far. But it's still interesting to understand the amount of work that needs to be done, because that'll help you understand the timelines that we're talking about as well for getting things to the commission.
Yes. And regarding that timeline, Ms. LaMagna has provided a recommended schedule for the commission's consideration and approval. As you'll see, the schedule allots time for 3 town hall-style community listening sessions and sufficient time for this commission to discuss and recommend any proposed changes. The commission's final report must be presented to the city commission for their consideration no later than June 5th, 2024. This allows the city commission time for discussion at workshop, formal vote, and what recommendations to bring forward, and adoption of the required ordinances. Once the ordinance is passed on second reading, the ballot questions will be submitted to the supervisor of elections no later than August 20th, 2024. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
And if I can just add to that, just so you know, the charter itself requires the report to be delivered to the commission at least 3 months before the general election. The ordinance that establishes your procedures requires at least 4 months. But the recommendation in front of you is really to provide a little bit more time than that, in part because of some of the work that's going to need to be done in terms of creating accurately stated ballot questions, which is what the commission would be voting on when it gets to the commission, and also to give the commission sufficient time to make that determination, and the supervisor of elections to actually put things on the ballot for the general election.
And for these referendums, we will also have to have them translated into Spanish as well.
What?
We'll have to have them translated into Spanish as well.
Oh.
And provide that to the supervisor of elections.
So there's quite a lot of work for staff to do and for the commission to do once you all are done, which is why the recommendation is to frankly exceed the charter required deadline as well as the deadline required by ordinance.
Are questions
Yeah.
open now? Can we ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My question would be, when's the last time the charter review made a change? And do you have an example of what that might have been?
The last Charter Review Commission was in 2014. Per our charter, as you'll read, we hold a Charter Review Commission at least every 10 years. But so the last one was in 2014, and there were changes put on the ballot and therefore adopted by the electorate.
Oh,
So I have,
Yep.
this is what the final report was for the 2014 charter review. It also includes the minutes from all those meetings, so I can, I'll put this, a copy of all this. I didn't want to print it out in case you guys didn't want it.
yeah. No,
Or I can send it electronically.
I could get it electronically, or I could come to your office and
Yeah.
just peruse it.
Absolutely.
I just wondered if, if there had been changes.
Yeah,
back
or-
in
or-
I'd like a copy. Email is fine.
Okay.
Or there's a cheat sheet version, in my opinion, which is the actual ordinance that was
Right.
passed outlining, we had, it appears, 3 changes at the last charter review, if I'm reading that correctly,
Yes.
though there were many other proposals.
Cliff notes.
One thing that we're going to encounter as we proceed, and a lot of the particulars will depend on how you decide you want to go about reviewing. Do you want to go front to back through the charter, which frankly is what's typically recommended. That way you're going in an organized fashion. But as Drew alluded to, there are some charter amendments that wouldn't be legal. We can't amend the charter in a way that would conflict with state law. And to give you a real concrete example of that, and in fact, I recently had a question on this kind of issue. I was asked if we could do a charter amendment that would impose a height limit.
What?
A height limit on buildings.
Oh,
And up until last year, the answer was yes. But in fact, this past year in 2023, the legislature adopted a statute that prohibits referenda, which is the way you amend the charter. It doesn't mention the word charter, but it prohibits referenda to adopt land development regulations and comprehensive plan amendments. So the answer is now no. The answer would have been yes 2 years ago, and if 2 years ago we would have put that in the charter, I'd have to look back at this law, but it probably would wipe that out as well. So I can't give you a detailed listing as we sit here tonight as to what would or wouldn't be kosher, but as we proceed, when we get suggestions, those will be things that I'll have to, go back and hit the books on and just make sure that we're good. Yeah.
And since there's thousands of municipalities in the state, the National League of Cities does have guidance documents. We have a model city charter, which is just what they would recommend, or it gives you some guidance just when drafting our charter, or else there's the Guide for Charter Commission, 6th edition. I will email links to Ms. LaMagna, and she will forward those on if you wish to review. They're actually pretty good.
Thank you. We're now at 4.3 to sit in the schedule for the meeting. Setting the schedule for the meeting. I see staff have given us a timeline. I'd like for you guys to take a look at it. Are there any motions? And would you have a motion to accept the timeline?
I'll make that motion.
Been accepted. And second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
work.
Great. We'll use that. At this time, we've come to item number 5, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I do, from Mr. John Nicholson, who signed up to speak. I don't know where he went. Well, if it's at your
Well,
pleasure, we can
At
move on
this
to the
time,
board comments.
We'll go on to the board comments, starting with Zone 1.
Okay, make my microphone work.
It's on.
Hit the button.
There it is.
There.
Oh, I thought that red, I was looking for that red light. Well, I just want to say I'm very excited about being on this this charter review committee. I've looking forward to working with you all. I do have a few thoughts on what I'd like to see changes. So I don't know, and some of them, this is just questions, but the rest are thoughts. I don't know if you'd like to have them distributed to you in hard copy or get them online later. I've kind of divided them up, so I think we can slot them in if we go through the charter in order. But that's all I have.
All right.
I can
Do you
pass
want?
this up.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. White?
I'm a stand-in, so I can't speak on behalf of Mr. Bowler, but I'm excited to be up here, even though you might not see me again. And I'm sure Mr. Bowler is excited when he shows up. I don't have any comments. I'm here to learn for right now, and but I'm excited to learn about the process.
Mr. White, we would encourage you and all of the alternates to show up at every meeting because,
I meant up here,
sure.
in this unique position.
But just to be clear, it's going to be helpful if God forbid, your primary member for whom you're an alternate has to leave the commission altogether, you want to have had the advantage
Sure.
of being.
He has assured me he wouldn't miss a meeting. Now I'm found myself here at the first one, so I don't know. But yes, this won't be the only time you'll see me.
Thank you, Mr. White. We're happy that you're here. Mr. Lloyd?
I just want to thank the staff for helping prepare us for this assignment. It's all new. It's new to me, and I'm looking forward to working on it. I think the sample city charters would be good documents to have as a guide as we go through this. And I'm assuming as we go through the charter and we have ideas, we can insert them and bring them up at those times. But it's going to be a crash course, I think, for all of us, but we'll get it done.
Great. Mrs. Mailer?
Thank you. Malia, like me, you can call me Malia. I'll answer to that too. I'm excited to be able to address this. I didn't have any questions or changes. That's why I asked the question, what's the general change for a charter amendment? So I'm same side that you are, excited about being on the committee, and I really appreciate it. I was just sharing with him, I saw the dates every Monday, and I thought it was every week that we would be seeing each other. So this is very exciting to me. I just had a conflict tonight, and I won't have a conflict for any other night. So I'm very pleased to be on this and bring whatever expertise I have. And I was telling him too, I've been household owner since '75, so I've been here forever. I'm on the Human Services Advisory Board of Volusia County, which deals with homelessness and so on, and this will be another thing to look at for me in my retirement. Thank you.
Great. The representative for the Great Zone 6, Ms. Ida Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure being here. Look forward to it. Anytime you look at charters or anything that drive how we operate within the city, county, or school district, it's always interesting. So I look forward to it.
Great. Guess I can recognize myself. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ann and Mr. Lloyd. I was thinking that I was punished because I was the mayor's representative, but that's okay. But I want to also thank the staff for putting this package together for us, and city attorney, deputy city attorney, city clerk, and it's going to be a wonderful meeting. I'm looking forward to this great meeting of this board. I see that John is not here, so we will bypass the public comments.
I'll figure alternates to change.
Okay, the alternates, if you guys have any comments, I'd love to hear from you guys as well. And you can use that mic if you. Great.
I'm Russ Weatherington. I've been on a few boards and actually retired assistant county administrator for Daniel County 6 years ago, and also retired military. So I look at these processes, have looked at them on both sides of the fence, and I will get with Ida, since I'm her alternate, and give her some comments on some things I'd already looked at in the charter before. And it's not an easy process, as all of y'all know, but I think it's very due for our diligence to go through it in case there's something that we see. Looking forward to it.
And so you say that you was administrator in Hernando, that's Brooksville?
Brooksville as the assistant county administrator.
Oh, so did you know the guy we have here is our redevelopment director at that time? Great, thank you, we're happy to have you. And the representative from Zone 6, Assistant 5, I'm sorry.
My name is Denise Brown. I'm a former city commission candidate for Zone 5. So we will definitely be talking to
Great.
I'm very looking forward to the process, learning more about how everything's being run, and also be an example for my children. They're watching every single thing that I do. My oldest is now 18. She's going to be graduating this year. But when I was on the campaign trail before, she was with me at every single stop and every single thing that we were doing. So it's really important to me to be that example for them, but also to be involved in the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. And if there's no other comments, we're going to adjourn this meeting.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Did
please
you,
come there.
well, I was
I
gonna,
just said, come, please come.
and then I was just gonna make it quick.
I'm Sandy Murphy, and I am Ann's alternate. One thing that I've thought a lot about is the growth in our city and how that size makes a difference. And I hope that as this group goes through that process, that will be part of your thinking in terms of what we have now and then what we need to have to really cope with that kind of growth. And I look forward to hearing all of this discussion and seeing what people have to contribute. Thanks.
And since, Mr. Nicholson wasn't here, I will email you all, because he did write down his comments about term limits, citywide elections, not having zones, adopting federal, state, and county rules. I can't read that. Balanced spending in all zones, 6 months for census data release to start redistricting, and no immediate family members serving on the same board. So I'll email this out to you. We also have a web page that we have for the Charter Review Commission. It has all of your names on it. And it'll have the copies of the agendas and the minutes will be posted there. There's also a link where citizens can email me to forward on to you guys their comments or questions, so.
Mr. Chair, if I can, 2 more comments. I promised everybody our office phone number, so that number is 671-8040. I also, 671-8040. You can ask for me, Ben Gross, and if I'm not available, just ask for any of the attorneys on staff. I also wanted to mention one thing for you to consider beginning next meeting, because it may or may not affect, say, for example, Mr. Bowler. In the ordinance that governs your rules and procedures, it reads, a member missing 2 consecutive meetings of the Charter Review Commission will be deemed to have resigned unless excused by an extraordinary majority of the Charter Review Commission members. And so we actually knew in advance that Mr. Bowler wasn't going to be here. You could certainly vote before you go whether to excuse his absence tonight, or if he's here next week, it wouldn't matter. You could also vote to excuse both of those absences if he's not here. I said next week, I meant next meeting. You could do it for both of them then. But I just wanted you to be aware of it. It's a 2 consecutive absence rule, supermajority to excuse the absence. One last thing is if any of you can't be here in person in a given meeting, but want to appear remotely, there is possibly a way for you to do that so long as we have a physical quorum present, but it takes some time to set up. So I would encourage you, if you think that's going to be the case, to get with Ms. LaMagda and her staff at least a few days before the meeting. And with that, you might be able to appear remotely on TV or by phone.
Deputy City Manager,
So,
do you have any?
so now I have a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
So if there's a website where people can submit, will you be gathering the submittals and sending them to us?
Yes.
Okay, great,
I was
thank
about to
you.
ask, that does include your recommendations as well.
Oh, shouldn't you want me to put those up there?
It's up to staff, really.
I don't
mean,
believe,
if it's
it's
to,
not a site for posting per se.
Okay,
It just offers a link to her email address, and being a commission member, you're already accomplishing that by handing her the material.
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
It wasn't a public record when I created it on my computer and gave it to Sandy, but now that I gave it to Letitia, it is a public
And I'm the
record.
custodian of that record.
And you are custodian.
Deputy
I'm a
City
little bit,
Manager?
I'm a little bit concerned about, we have this meeting March 11th, and then we go right into the town hall meetings. And I'm just curious what the format is of the town hall meetings. Is there anything that this Charter Review Commission can do to make those be as productive as possible? And I think that's something we need to think about for next meeting.
Yeah, staff's thought behind that, and it's only our thought, was that they're active listening sessions. This is an opportunity to hear from the community. They're talking to this commission, telling them what they want, whether it's a street light or whatever it is they want. You're going to hear directly from them, and you could assemble that information for deliberation when you return to this dais, or however you choose to act. It's up to this commission.
So it's active listening rather than presenting anything.
That was staff's proposal, but is up to this commission.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the ordinance does not define what a town hall meeting is as opposed to a generic public meeting. All your meetings are public meetings. So it really is up to you all to decide what you want to do with those town hall meetings.
We wouldn't follow Robert's Rules of Order. Typically, a town hall is a more conversational format.
It's really up to you as a group to make that decision.
Okay.
So,
We'll look to our chairman to give us guidance.
right on March 11th, we can determine whether we're going to give them 1 minute or 4 minutes.
We'll make that decision at a later date.
But I do think, following up on what Drew said, and I know we probably are going to want to leave sooner rather than later, we thought that this next meeting, tonight was an organizational meeting, some basic stuff, that the next meeting could be your mapping out, your strategic meeting, and then the schedule may change based on that. So,
Cool.
yeah.
That is all.
If there's no other comment, meeting is adjourned.